Welcome back, everyone. Today we will be talking about painting realistic skin tones with watercolor paint. In our past weeks, we've worked on 21 different basic watercolor painting techniques, and I will be referencing these as we're going through the process today and in future videos, so keep those techniques in the back of your mind for reference. You also are going to be getting your color version of your picture soon, and that will help as well as we're looking for matching to those skin tones. So we can be looking for the subtleties in our different skin variations as we're trying to match that for our final self-portrait drawing. So today we're just going to practice a little bit with making different skin tones and seeing what colors work best for our individual skin tone. The colors that we're going to be focusing most on are going to be red, orange, yellow, and brown. There's also, with the green and the blue and the purple and the black, ways that we can mix those in and incorporate those as well. But our main focus is going to be these warm colors and then also our brown for a little bit more depth and shadow. I'm going to start by activating my paint, and I'm going to be using this part of my tray, my paint tray on the end here, for mixing today. So I'm just going to activate my paint with water and then put some of my paint on the tray here. So in between colors, I'm going to be rinsing out my brush just so that I'm not polluting these colors as I'm going, between them. All right, so far I have red, orange, and yellow. I'm going to add some brown to this. And now I'm going to mix them all together. So I'm going to use water. I'm just going to kind of bring them all in here. And yes, this looks very vibrant right now, and this maybe doesn't look like a realistic skin tone quite yet. But when you add water to this and then you apply it to your paper, it is going to dilute it incredibly. So here we have a skin tone that kind of has a reddish undertone. So now we're just going to play around. If this is kind of our basic beginning point, we're going to play around with adding more orange to this and more yellow to this and more red to this and more brown to this in different stages and just see what happens to our variation here. So I'm going to start by adding some more red, and with my water, mix that into what I already have here. And then I'm going to dilute that a little bit more with water, and then I'm going to paint that on my paper. So this might be a really good color for lips, depending on what your lip color is, or your cheeks, or maybe even sunburn. Now let's switch. We're going to try this with some orange instead. The key to keeping this light is a lot of water. So again, this is still kind of like a pinkish color, and a lot of us do have pink undertones to our skin. And even with adding more water, I can lighten that up. So this is probably more of like a skin tone up here, whereas this might be better for lips or your cheek areas if you have like blush or sunburn. So something like this would be a good skin tone if you have kind of some pink undertones. Let's try adding some yellow. So here we have a skin tone that definitely has some more yellow undertones. And I can always spread this out with water and make it lighter. The more water that I'm adding to this and the more that I'm spreading out this color, the lighter it's going to become. So if you ever apply paint to your paper and you're thinking, wow, this is way too dark, you have several options. You can add some water to it to dilute it. You can spread it out more. You can even use your paper towel and dab on top of it to take some of the color out and some of the water out, and then use water on top of that to spread it out even more. But again, this is another good Caucasian skin tone that has some undertones of a more yellowish base. So these would all be, I would say, something that would fit well with the Caucasian skin if you're trying to match that. So if we add more brown into this, we can deepen the pigmentation a little bit more. Let's see what we end up with this. So by adding the brown, it's getting a little bit darker. And again, if this is still too deep from what I want it to be, I can add water to that and spread it out a little bit more. And I mentioned this in previous videos, but anywhere that you're getting these puddles that are caught up in the edges, you can always use your paper towel and pull some of that extra water up and then blend that out. A lot of times we don't want to have those puddles of darker colors just sitting on our paper. So it is helpful to just use a paper towel to pull up that extra water that's kind of making a pool or a puddle in that area. Okay. Let's try adding even more brown to this. Getting an even deeper pigmentation. So I would encourage you, even if you think that you have a darker skin tone, don't just go immediately for the brown. There are a lot of subtleties in your skin that aren't just simply brown. So I would encourage you to add some pinks into it and see what that does, or add some oranges or some yellows, just to see what the variation looks like when you add those different subtleties in. So for instance, let's try adding some yellow into that really deeper brown that we started here. So we're still getting a dark complected pigmentation, but now we're getting a little bit more of a yellow undertone to that. So what you're mixing in truly does change the intensity of the skin and also the undertones. You can also, in making brown, use the primary colors and mix those all together. So I'll show you that in a second here. When you reach capacity here with your tray, I just use a paper towel and soak up some of the water and the paint and just clean off that area. I can even use a little bit more water to remove any paint that's stuck. And then I can start fresh. So let's try something else in addition to just practicing with these different skin tones. If you start with blue, yellow, and red and mix those together, you can also get a very rich brown color that could be used for skin tone as well. Since these are all primary colors, when you mix them together in equal amounts, you're going to get a neutral, in this case a brown. So let's just, for example, look at this browning compared to the brown that I used that was mixing yellow, orange, and red together. So this has a little bit of a different look to it. And even if I just use plain brown by itself, you can see there's a lot of differences in these browns based on how I'm mixing them. And maybe this brown does match what you need it to be, but I would really encourage you to test out and compare to your picture first before you just jump immediately to brown if that's what you need. So back to our basics here with the orange and the yellow and the red. Let's just try orange and red, orange and yellow mixed together and see what happens there. You don't have to use all components that I mentioned at the beginning. You can just see what different components mixed together, like 2 out of the 3, look like. So here again, we have a little bit more of a yellowish skin tone. And that truly might match some of your skin tones. You just have to look at your picture and compare. And then if we try red and yellow, what's gonna happen there? So there is a wide array of different skin tones that we can get just from using a couple different colors and mixing them together. I can also incorporate purple into this as a shadowed area. Now with something like that, I don't want the purple to overpower the other base colors, so I want to make sure it's just a small amount of purple, and if it becomes too much, I'm going to add more of those colors back in that I started with, like the orange and the yellow in this case. But I know that I will be using purple in my portrait because there are some areas that are in shadow, and just the way that the light is being cast, it does have a purplish look to it. So first step is you're just going to practice some of these different skin tones. Just see what you come up with, and then you can be comparing it to your picture and saying, okay, what is closest to what I need it to be? And try to remember what you mixed to get to that step. So transitioning here, I'm going to start painting on my actual project now so that you can see how to go about this. So again, just like you, I drew from a black and white grid. I erased my grid lines, so this is what I have left over. And I now have a color picture to use as reference. I'm going to clean this out so I can start fresh here. Just accept now that this is going to be a layering process. The first thing that you put on your paper is not going to be accurate to this. This is going to be layering up to get to our skin tone. So we will start with kind of a basic undertone, and then we will build shadows on top of that. So I'm kind of looking in my picture for, I would say, maybe just the lightest skin tone that I can find to start as a nice base. So I have some highlighted areas on my chin, on this part of my cheek, on my forehead, on this part of my neck. So I'm kind of looking at those, and that's what I'm aiming on matching here. So this is going to be a lot lighter when I first paint it than I'm going to make it when I finish it. So just knowing me, I know that I have a lot of reds in my skin tone. So I'm going to kind of use that as a component of my base rather than trying to make it look more of a yellow skin tone. So I do want to make sure I have red in mine. I know that for sure. I need red. And you can even just look at your skin, not in the picture, you know, and compare it to someone else's skin and just see like, oh, my skin looks a little bit more pink than yours does. Maybe I should make sure that I have red when I'm painting. Or my skin tone appears a little bit more yellow or brown. And that can be a good way of kind of determining a starting point as well. But my encouragement is start off light because you can always add to it and make it darker. But if you're starting off too dark, it does become more of a challenge to lighten it up. Okay, so I just kind of started off generally how we started our practice round with some red, some orange, and some yellow, and some brown. And we're gonna see what we end up with here. I'm gonna make sure I add a lot of water to this so that I'm not ending up with this color on my paper. I want this to be really diluted. And I'm going to just, I guess, start in this chin area. I'm just gonna follow the contour of this for now. And I don't even have to add more paint necessarily right now. Like if I'm happy with this, I can just keep adding water to this and just keep spreading this out. And again, I'm really trying to avoid this happening. See how I stopped there and now I have just color that's stuck? I don't want that to happen. So I'm gonna keep going with my color. And anywhere that I'm getting those little puddles, I'm either going to use my paper towel to immediately pull that up, or I'm going to use my brush to keep spreading out the paint so that it doesn't just stop there and become like a really harsh edge. I can get more paint on my brush when I need it. So like I said, this is just base layer number 1. This doesn't have to be perfect. I'm going to be going over this and changing it a lot, adding to it. But for right now, I'm just kind of making myself a base layer of what I think my skin tone is kind of starting at. Okay, so I've created for myself just a nice base layer of my skin, and now I'm going to be looking into adding shadows where I'm seeing shadows in my picture. So for example, I have shadows under my chin, underneath my nose, on the right side underneath my ear and on my neck, on the inside of all of my arms, and then on the back of this arm as well, which is kind of cut off, but there are shadows there. There's shadows in the middle part of my neck as well. So I'm looking for those shadowed areas, and now I'm trying to increase the intensity of my color because I want that to be a darkened area. I don't want it to be quite as light as what I did before. So I'm gonna add a little bit more brown into what I was working with for my base layer. Now I'm gonna go back into these areas and start adding just a little bit more. And I do want this to blend in with what I already have. So see how I just have like a harsh line in between those right now? I don't want that to be the case. So in order to make this happen and blend together, I'm gonna do the gradient like we did when we were practicing. So I'm adding water only and just blending out with water until it blends into my base layer. Then I will not end up with a harsh line. So I'm just using water here and I'm blending it. And I know I need a shadow down here, so I'm blending it like this. Now I'm gonna use that same color. I'm gonna find some other areas where I know that I need a shadow. Again, I don't want that to stay a harsh line like that, so I'm using only water. I'm gonna blend that into my base layer. Same thing, I'm looking again, where can I find an area of shadow? Inside my ear. Now, even though I'm adding shadows, this is still not nearly as dark or the same color as my skin tone as I want it to be. So like I said before, this is purely a layering process where we are just going to be doing this a couple different times and adding to it to get it to where we need it to be. The key in blending is you need to start blending it before it dries. So this does have to be kind of a quick process. Anywhere that I don't want to have a harsh edge, the faster I get to blending it into the base layer, the easier it's going to be to get rid of that harsh edge. And as we practiced before, anywhere that you're not happy with something, you can always add water. Or we can try the magic eraser technique. Anything that we did before when we were practicing that allowed us to lift our paint off of the paper, that's going to be a good thing to remember for any areas that you're not quite happy with. Like here, I knew I didn't want a harsh line right there because I have a little bit of a line, but it's not that harsh. So I wanted to just kind of use water. And so I did. I just pulled up some of that harsh edge by just using water and blending it out. So at this point, this is nowhere near completed, but I am just going to continue to add layers to this until I feel like I have reached the place that it matches this, or it gets at least close as it can to this. So I'm just going to kind of let these dry a little bit and continue adding more shadows where I see that I need them.